how do you introduce somebody who does not need any introduction? That's my problem. So I'll try to be brief. We have the two Silicon Valley legends here coming to speak in front of us and share their knowledge experience. So Scott Thurm is a famous journalist, award-winning. He's with the Information Right Now magazine, before that at the Wired magazine, Wall Street Journal for 18 years, Pulitzer Prize Award, you guys have heard about that. He's a winner there. There's another award that a couple other awards he won. So Scott is going to come and he's going to engage John in a fireside chat. So I'd like to get Scott up on the stage. So Scott, if you can please come take your seat. Thank you. Scott Thurm. All right. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. John Chambers. Who has not heard of John? Yeah, there you go. But anyway, so he's currently the founder and CEO of JC2 Ventures. And his whole mission is to help disruptive startups build and scale. He's the chair of US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, which is a huge organization building bridges between US and India for trade and technology. He's a global ambassador for French tech and appointed by President Macron in France. And he got a big award from him that no foreign national has gotten in 35 years from the French government. So he's just highly accoladed. He promotes entrepreneurship, gender equality, and new business creation for the states, for countries, as well as for the world. And he also is the recipient of Padma Bhushan Award from Indian government. This is amazing thing, okay? Padma Bhushan, okay? It's a rare honor for John to have. 25 years plus that he spent at Cisco. He built the business from 70 million to 47 billion in 25 years reign. Amazing. Harvard Business Review in 2015, I think they made a mistake. They said that he's number 2 best performing CEOs in the world. So I think that's an editorial mistake probably. He got Edison Award for Innovation, Outstanding Civil Service Award by the US Army, and the accolades just go on and on, okay? So if I rattle off all that stuff, we'll be here all morning. So anyway, so John, with that, please come join us. Congratulations. Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I will try not to let you down today. It's an honor to be with so many friends. Happy birthday, number 39 and counting, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Thank you. And holding.
All right, my friend.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hey, Scott, this will be fun.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Take it away.
Okay. Thank you all for coming. Welcome. Thrilled to be the first panel this morning. Many of you might not know this, but for us, this is something of a reunion.
It is.
I covered Cisco for 5 years or so at the Wall Street Journal many years ago. I was covering Cisco the day in March of 2000. It became the most valuable company on earth. And then I had to watch John deal with what happened after that, which wasn't always so pleasant. And you ultimately left Cisco. And for the people who may not know your whole history, why don't you walk people through what you've been doing since you left Cisco and what you're doing now?
It'll be my pleasure. For those of you who know me, if I don't get up and talk to the audience, I don't connect as well. It's a pleasure to be back with my extended family. You all know my commitment to the Indian region and the India diaspora here in the US. I think the most strategic relationship in the world is between our two countries. So what have I been doing since I left Cisco? I'm doing, for the first time in my business career, what I love the most, which is nurturing young companies and helping them to grow. At Cisco, I acquired about 180 companies. We probably set the gold standard for how do you do that well, and we also learn from our mistakes as we move forward. But since I left Cisco, I now have 22 startups. We have 9 unicorns among those startups, focus a lot in cybersecurity, which we'll probably talk a little bit later about, Scott, and also artificial intelligence, not starting in November this last year, but 6 years ago, and how that would be the next major frontier after the internet, then after cloud, and now AI, which I think will be dramatically bigger than all the waves that went in front of it. In terms of what I enjoy doing, I'm more of a strategic partner, a mentor, a coach to the young teams. I like to be referred to as their older brother. They probably call me their father in many ways. But it is that comfort level that I enjoy, and then watching others really be successful. Scott, I've seen every movie. I've goofed it up at least once in the process and learned a lot, and sharing that with others and help them through the challenging times and the good times. I'm also, as Vish said in the kind comments, I'm the French high-tech minister for Macron in France when he decided to make France from, candidly, the worst place to do business in the world, in Europe, to the best. And they lead now in unicorn growth as an example. Prime Minister Modi is a very good friend. He outlined a digital agenda, 11 planks to it, etc. He teases me about being his global ambassador. And it's an honor watching India position the country for what will be the fastest growing country in the world for the next probably 2 decades as we move forward with that digitization at the foundation of the direction. And then something very lightly talking about, when you think about the future of startup regions, my home region of West Virginia is becoming a digital state, is becoming the fastest growing state in the nation economically, even though originally we were listed as number 45, 46, 47, 48, or 49 in terms of the status. So we take these concepts that we learned over time and say, how do you really make a difference in the world? Simply put, I'm trying to change the world one more time, after many of my colleagues, and I saw many of you today from Cisco, did it with the internet. So Scott, let me give it back to you, and you take us wherever you want to go. If you agree with everything Scott and I say, we failed. We want to get you a little bit uncomfortable. We want to challenge your thought process.
Well, if we agree with each other, we failed, that's for sure. So you do a lot of startup investing. Silicon Valley Bank, which was a big player in that world, just failed and got taken over. First Republic just got taken over. So what are you seeing out there in terms of the environment for investment in startups these days?
Okay, so Scott knows where I'm going to go with this. I always start with the big picture. The big picture is tech is not only here to stay. Technology, the digital world, digital countries, digital companies, digital individuals will be the future. And those waves of the internet, and then followed by the cloud for 2 decades, now AI, will be what really powers that as we move forward. So I've never been more optimistic, Scott, that I'm on technology and the future of technology, except that finally people are realizing every country will be digital. And I think people are going to realize much quicker than perhaps we would have thought just a year ago, every company, every individual will be AI enabled in terms of their direction. In terms of what we're seeing, and Scott referred to it in terms of Silicon Valley Bank, it had been a mainstay for Silicon Valley in terms of the financing, the direction, et cetera. And it had helped so many of us in the Valley, startups and the venture capital world, be successful. But it speaks to how fast this market is moving. And one of the sayings that I really believe in is you either disrupt or you get disrupted. And the pace of change is accelerating again. We said the internet 3 times the speed before that, cloud, the 3 times the speed of the internet. And then we said today's world with AI, 3 times the speed of what existed with the cloud. And to put the numbers behind that, we talked earlier about Washington Mutual and how when they had trouble and it was a $16 billion problem, it occurred over 10 days. Silicon Valley Bank, $42 billion in 1 morning. You are seeing speed of change, which none of us have ever seen before. And it causes us all to think about how do we do things differently. It also, there are often unexpected and unintended consequences, which looking backwards, Scott, are obvious, but were not obvious at the time.
That's what we do best in journalism.
Well, we try to avoid that as CEOs, although sometimes we miss, obviously. For me, that was clearly 2001. A lot of successes, but I missed the transition in 2001, even though the stock market was signaling there were some problems there. Most painful year of my life, especially from the business side. But in 2008, we got it right. But it goes back to the speed of this change is going to occur. We should have known when you move from free money to 5.25%, you can do the math on how quickly that occurred. What is that, a 2,500% increase in
well, from free, it would be an infinite increase.
Yeah, but that started a little bit just a hair above that. But where Scott's leading me is absolutely right. It's the fastest in history by a factor of 10-fold what's ever been done before. Unintended consequences, of course. And it looks obvious after the fact. So this is the market we're now in. It's not going to wait for anyone. You either disrupt or you're going to get disrupted. For those of you in the room, how many of you are interested in funding from venture capital? Quick show of hands. it's going to be hard. And while there's 500 million on the sidelines there, 500 billion on it, the VCs are looking at how do they fund their current unicorns, how do they fund their commitments that have already been made. And so for new money into new company, it's fairly hard to do. If you look at what is going to happen, probably a third of the unicorns, maybe even half, will not be a unicorn a year from now, Scott. And with that, you have major funding issues for the companies that have already invested in those companies. Well, that is something we would have loved to have avoided. It was inevitable. Free money, too many opportunities, measuring companies purely on growth without a regard to free cash flow and profitability. That goes back to what were we thinking? So when you really think about it, you realize this speed is going to be dramatic. But the digital world will wait for no one. And you will see the next generation of companies, great companies, comes out of startups or small companies that are founded during this slowdown or break away during this slowdown for the future. I've had 4 companies get funded in the last several months. All 4 of them were funded in an up round. But
are there sectors, are there particular sectors within the startup world where it's slightly easier to raise money now than others?
Yes, there are. So when you think about it, the hottest areas all of us understand is cybersecurity. It's one of the 2 biggest. But even in that area, Scott, the projection for growth in cybersecurity expenditures this year in enterprise was only 12%, and it's probably not going to hit that 12% number. Yet as the CEO and as the board start being held accountable for cybersecurity oversight and review, and as we see the number of malicious hacks, rogue nation states, organized crime that comes into it, cybersecurity will be, I think, one of the key winners here across all industries as everybody gets connected. I've got 9 cybersecurity companies. So far, they've been very fortunate, Scott. They're growing between 40 and 300%. But it's in areas like cyber risk quantification with a SAFE, which the other day, a small company run by Sakat Modi, he had 7 term sheets for a $50 million raise. And so if you're in the hot areas, those are continue to be hot. You always want to worry, don't read your own press. There's the chance there's a wave coming for some of my companies that we haven't seen. That's, to me, is very exciting, and that's something that you know I started at Cisco when I acquired 8 cybersecurity companies back when I was CEO there. I believe it is here to stay, and with this everything digital world getting connected, the Internet of Things, 5G, AI on steroids, if you will, cybersecurity is key. However, AI, I bet on 6 years ago. And it was interesting, Scott. No matter how many times you tell people something, until it becomes obvious and crosses the chasm, people don't get it. The Internet, my biggest issue with the Internet was getting Cisco confused with Cisco food trucks. And when Jeff Bezos went public with Amazon, it wasn't his vision of selling stuff over the Internet. It was explaining to people what the Internet was. And then it becomes obvious. So we've seen digitization all the way back in 2011. We said it'll be a digital world. We're now seeing that play out. AI, literally 6 years ago, will be the next frontier. So I think AI is going to be key, but it's how do you think about it architecturally in terms of compute, who owns the data, what are the AI algorithms that really make it go. So those are the hottest areas. Geographically hottest areas, candidly, if you're going to bet on one country in the world, and you all know I'm the biggest bull in the world on India and have been for many years, but India is executing extremely well. It will be the fastest growing economy in the world for the next 2 decades, barring a huge surprise. But we're seeing this capability go to every state in India and candidly every state in the US and throughout Europe. So all of a sudden you see France really making a difference, where France was the last place I would have invested money 10 years ago. And now, candidly, it's the hottest place for startups and unicorns. And unicorns, even though there's going to be a reprioritization and some markdowns on it, still is the best way, along with IPOs, to judge who is doing the best on really growing and scaling companies. France last year grew at 19% growth in unicorns. India grew at 22%. US grew at 11.5%. And interestingly enough, China only grew at 5%. It's the first year China has fallen behind the rest of the world in terms of growth in unicorns and technology innovation. Nobody, including Silicon Valley, is entitled. And so we'll see how it emerges as we move forward. But those are the areas that I'm looking at.
So you may have just transitioned into this, but compared with, let's say, 2 years ago, are there places that you're less excited about? Yeah,
Yes.
I know you never get less excited about anything,
But degrees of excitement.
Given the way the world has
Yeah,
changed.
no, it's a fair constructive criticism too, because you want to be careful not to fall in love with something and not listen to critics, people that have different points of views as you move forward. So as you begin to think about a startup company, one of the most fundamental things is 2 years ago, people were focused on growth, growth, growth. And often the VCs not only encourage that, they said, don't worry about free cash flow. We've got unlimited amount of money. Don't worry about profitability. Let's get the growth. That's what the market's going to measure you on. And the multiples got insane. It was almost above where 2001 was, or 2000 on the multiples. And so multiples in cloud-based software as a service, which the well-run companies publicly were probably about 45, are now low double digits, 11 to 14. However, if you're growing, you can grow into those. The second thing is that you're seeing the companies pivot to profitable growth. And your initial reaction is, John, that's obvious. It is hard to do for you in the room. If you've been focused on growth, 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 your sales machine, your marketing machine, your organization structure was different. And you can't just give it a haircut and say, well, that'll get the profitability. So this transition to focus on profitable growth, and equally important, Scott, outcome-based selling, selling results, selling return on investment, selling increased revenues, is a transition each of your sales force and your channels to market must go through. And it sounds obvious, but after 12 years of huge tailwinds and uninterrupted economic growth and free capital, that's probably going to cause a quarter of these companies to really struggle with even making the transition and surviving. So startups that are outcome-based, startups that are literally focused on profitable growth, startups that are in some of the hard areas, both geographically and market share-wise, are key on it, and realize there will be a natural thinning occur, unfortunately, as well.
How are you managing that with the companies in your portfolio? What are you suggesting they do and not do?
Gotcha. So when you think about it, the first thing, and we started over 2.5 years ago to 3 years ago, saying this merry-go-round on free capital is going to eventually end. So I pushed all my startups to focus on where they were going in terms of profitable growth and to raise money, which most all of them did. Then, having seen, I think, 6 economic downturns, you have to be prepared that this occurs normally every 5 to 10 years. There had been no disruption for over a decade in uninterrupted growth with free capital. That was going to happen, and when you hit it, it's classic. You basically say how much of your issues are self-inflicted and how much are market, and don't fall into the trap this is largely market-driven. It is not. When you all look at your companies and your organization, including my own, probably half the issues you face when you really prepare for a downturn and to break away on the upturn were self-inflicted. And then you want to say, what are the market? Then you break it, Scott, into the planks that you do to be successful. Focus on the customers first, your employees, focus on your business strategy. What are you going to do? What are you going to not do? Here are the ways you ought to follow our progress to those objectives. Here's what our North Star is. You want to look like when you come out. You communicate regularly to your shareholders, to your employees, to your customers, your partners, and then you come through this. And this is where great companies are built. They're never built during the good times. They're built during the downturns. There's going to be a transition of the top 6 technology companies. Projected a year ago that you would see probably at least 2, maybe 3 drop out of leadership roles. And it'll be replaced by the next companies that come out of this downturn in very, very good shape on it. So it's learning how do you balance that, navigate through it. My companies so far have done it very well. We'll see if we continue as well. And Scott, I had an unfair advantage. I got the pick of the litter on which companies to invest in. But we stayed disciplined on it, and we built those fundamentals in early, and I'm blessed by companies I believe in.
When you step back, I mean, how does 2023 in your mind compare with 2009 or 2001? I mean,
Gotcha.
they're a downturn every 5 to 10 years. Are all downturns the same, or are they different? And if so, how's this one different?
Well, the thing that this downturn is different on dramatically is what we alluded to earlier with the question on the regional banks and the funding in the VC world. The speed is at least 3 and probably closer to 5 to 10 times faster than we saw in 2001. 2001 was a slow roll. In 2007, I shared that I thought we were headed for an economic problem based on my financial banks not spending as much money with me at Cisco as they traditionally did. People said that was unique to Cisco. I said, no, a problem's coming. 2008 did come. 2009 was very painful. But we were already prepared for that when we navigated through it much better than we did 2001, which was my mistake in 2001. This time, it's going to be even faster. When are we going to have a recession? How many people think we're going to have a recession in the next 6 months? How many people think we're in one? How many people definitely believe there will be a recession? Now, if we'd done that hand raising, Scott, 12, 15 months ago, same thing would have occurred. We've been just 6 months away from a recession and a major downturn. Things are unpredictable. We've never seen inflation. This generation of leaders have not dealt with inflation. I did, and I know what 18% mortgages are like and what it does to business when it occurs. So we're learning, but the Fed did not get the guidelines up quick enough on the regional banks, but they did respond when the crisis was there. And as Jamie Dimon said on First Republic, the banking system worked when JP Morgan Chase bought First Republic, etc. So we've come through this candidly better than I anticipated. And we'll see how so far. But that's been the statement we've said for 5 quarters in a row. So a word that I hate, Scott, is agility, because it sounds like marketing. But this year is about being agile. You have to be able to respond to a banking crisis. You have to be able to respond to inflation. You have to be able to respond to geopolitical pressures, etc. If you're not agile, you're going to get left behind. But if you only take one thing away from our conversation today, you either disrupt or you're going to get disrupted. And those of us who are complacent, that go through this without a sense of urgency, without almost a controlled crisis or panic type of approach, we will not come out of it in good shape. And we've gotten spoiled over the last 12 years, myself included, about how smooth the sailing was.
So we drifted into it a minute ago, but let's focus for a second on how the world's changed geopolitically, particularly in the last 2 or 3 years. And there are probably people in this room who had programmers working for them in Ukraine. Yes. There are definitely people here who've been doing hardware in China.
Yes.
Just what do you see around the world, and how has that changed the way your companies do, or you think other companies should think about dealing with the rest of the world?
Yeah, it's a great question, Scott, and there are probably 3 or 4 component parts of it. Let me deal with deglobalization first. I'm a huge believer in globalization. I think it served the world well. It allowed countries and people in areas that wouldn't have been able to participate very well, but that's coming to an end. As you deglobalize, candidly, it will put upward pressure on prices, which globalization helped us on. But I deal with the world the way it is, not the way I wish it was. My parents, who were 2 doctors, taught me that early. You are going to see alignment along strategic allies and relationships on this. You'll see the U.S. economy candidly have a huge upsurge in many manufacturing jobs for the first time really coming back. The semiconductor industry is an example, and others. And you will see alliances between countries that before were nice and loose, but the most strategic alliance that I think will occur in the world will be between the U.S. and India. I think both countries share the common democracy and the world philosophy on it. Both of them have an attitude toward win-win type of approaches. Both of them understand the importance of digitization and startups and big companies working together. And I think you will see this emerge on defense and other areas as well. So I think India has the chance to benefit most from this deglobalization, and I think countries that learn to work strategically along those lines can accomplish goals that would not occur otherwise. I'll use my home state of West Virginia that I alluded to earlier. Many people would think a state in the United States or one of the 28 states in India, every state can participate. It absolutely can. West Virginia was, as I said before, number 45 to 50 in every economic category after leading in my generation in the 60s and 70s when they were the chemical center and the coal center of the world. And in a period of 5 years, they outlined a vision from the top, and they became the fastest growing startup state, number 3 with 90% growth. Unemployment, as I alluded to earlier, is at an all-time low since we've been keeping statistics on it. We have 60,000 job openings. We're reinventing the education system to focus on outcomes. We're inviting companies such as Berkshire Hathaway Energy, LG Electronics that are coming in and putting billion-dollar projects into the state We've got 6 of those going on. We didn't get $1 billion project opportunity a decade for the last 7 decades. And so you see a state reinventing itself, 41 startups, much like Stanford did, or Station F did, or the IITs did around West Virginia University. And you see a growth in confidence that is almost unequaled in terms of the market and the capability. And they're number 6 in the nation now in GDP growth. Can you dream and make dreams come true? You absolutely can. Will this occur by geography? Will it occur by countries that have a common view, in my opinion, of an open system and technology being the driver of it? Yes, it will. But there is no entitlement, including here in Silicon Valley.
One thing that I think has changed, I mean, in the 30 years I've been covering Silicon Valley, feels like for that period, Silicon Valley companies have felt like they could go anywhere and do anything. They could get programming talent in Eastern Europe, they could do hardware in China.
Yeah.
Obviously that's changed. So how do you advise your companies to think about that? How should these people be thinking about where to locate resources or not, or how to deal with a world that's changed?
Well, I think part of it is in the answer I just gave, Scott. If you look at the number of engineers graduating in the US, it's about 60,000 a year. In India, it's 600,000. I think the relationship between India and the US is not just the most strategic, it will be the best exchange of talent. For my startups, all of them that are located in the US, their number 2 major location is India.
Well, I visited Cisco. Cisco was there in I know by 2004 because I visited it in 2004.
You're right. I made India my second world headquarters over 20 some years ago, and it worked out well for us. But India at that time wasn't moving as fast. Now it's an entrepreneurial nation that goes beyond just the major consultancy companies and the core underlying industry companies. It is one that is, I think, the hottest startup nation in the world, growing at 22% on it with the best visualization plan. So I think you are going to see those alignments occur closer, and it allows for relationships that are truly raising not just the businesses in each country, but touches the average citizen in a very unique way, like was done with COVID, with US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, where India helped us when we really needed it with some of the key pharmaceutical requirements. The US really helped India when they really needed it effectively with the speed that hadn't been seen before. So I see that being a big winner. I think there will be a couple of countries emerge in Europe, and we'll see which ones they are. You know, the French have the best advantage in terms of momentum, but the French can occasionally disrupt themselves, as we're seeing now. I really believe in Macron is very good. And then across the US, I think it is so important that we move 50 states into digital startup states, not just California, Texas, Boston, Atlanta, Miami. We'll see how that takes place, but I think it will. So that's kind of how I'm playing my hand out. That's where I'm betting.
So quick, we're almost out of time, but quickly, you mentioned a few parts of the world, just bullish or bearish on a few other places. China?
Bearish.
We sort of touched on Europe.
First time China has lost momentum in technology since I first started going there with Wang Laboratories 40 years ago. And I did the first joint venture in China. I think this will be a setback for them. I think the US and China will eventually work through our differences. I think it will get tougher before it gets better. But without realizing it, the unicorn growth is indicative that they're no longer moving with anywhere near the speed on the technology side they were 3, 5, 10 years ago on it. You saw that in unicorns being again, India grew more new unicorns, even though they have a much smaller base to operate off of than China did in total. So I think China's got some challenges.
I think we're done. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope we didn't disappoint you. It's an honor to be back with you. Thank you.